All right. I'm starting this new thing called podcasting, and you have a bit of familiarity. See, I'm already messing up with that, so I figured you could jump on and help me a little bit. But
I'd
where do
be
you?
delighted to. The thing about podcasting is what I learned is from doing 100 episodes on iTunes, um, people like the rawness of it. So make mistakes and just go
Yeah.
with it. Because the more it's like a normal conversation, the more people feel like they're party to it. Whereas when it's obviously slickly edited, personally, I find that annoying. And I think a lot of other people do. So, what made you decide to help people like me who have no background in computer science to build VR apps? Because you saved my bacon 2 years ago. Um, what was your inspiration?
Honestly, I was just trying to make. Well, I knew that YouTube was going to be a big thing, and it was like YouTube's just steadily growing, and it's everybody's trying to get into the social media game and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. I was like, well, YouTube's the long term play, and so I was originally trying to do it with like just normal software. Like I was designing websites and stuff, and I was making YouTube videos about how to do like web development coding, and then I got this like really crappy little like headset that you like slide your phone into,
All
and
right.
watched like some YouTube videos in VR with like this super crappy like basically a Google Cardboard,
I Google Cardboard. I
and
remember that. In fact, even
yeah,
when I was doing my masters in 2019, they brought that out. My
yeah,
eyes
it
are
was,
not uniform, like my eyes aren't standard distance apart. So when they put two little
uh
screens
huh.
in front of my eyes, I could not fuse the two images into one. And I was like, why are you selling this to us as something that's good? We've got all these like Vive Pros to use, and you're trying to sell us on this archaic VR technology. But your eyes are obviously better aligned than mine.
Yeah, it was off center just enough.
So you had a good experience with Google Glass. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that was good. So it wasn't. It was yeah, Google Cardboard.
Oh,
It
sorry,
wasn't
Google
that one, but it
Cardboard. Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
similar one.
Okay, got it.
And I was like, this is sweet. And then me being a software developer programmer, like that's what I majored in. I was like, this is like, how do I make my own version of this, like kind of thing. And so I was looking on YouTube, looking like in all the different forums and stuff, and there was like two YouTube channels who actually taught people how to do VR stuff,
And who were
and
they?
all the
Can you
videos were
remember?
outdated.
Can you remember what those
It
people were?
was
Because
it
that's
was
probably it.
Valem,
Valem. Okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah, Valem, and then VR with Andrew was the other one that I
Yeah, right.
saw,
I know both of
and
them intimately. I feel like I know them, but but
yeah,
I've never actually met them and had a live conversation. So I feel like a proper fanboy. Like I'm talking to Justin because those other guys, they were good, right? But there were definitely some. There's definitely room for improvement, and I'm anticipating that that's what you're going to go on to talk about. Like in some ways they were really good, and in other ways they weren't. So like Valem, bless his cotton socks, he's a very charming, charismatic man, but he was a bit self-conscious about how cool he was. What I liked about
it's
you
true.
was that you were just a little bit more what I felt to be, even without having met you. It felt like you're more like your true authentic self. You weren't trying to be too cool. And then other people would skip loads of important steps, and so they kind of presumed knowledge. Where if you were coming from really a standing start, like I was, um, you needed people to walk you through like all of it, and you would at least
Hmm.
allude to, like, you structured your stuff really well because you would allude to tutorials you've done before, and you had an awareness that clueless people like me would need guiding towards those, or you would just have the whole thing sit in one tutorial, but you wouldn't labor all the simple stuff. You'd mention it, and then flag if you need to go in more detail. There's another tutorial. So did you kind of calculate that would help you because you were a bit more formulaic in how you structured your podcasts, your YouTube
Yes.
channels?
Yeah, like it was when I was getting into it, there was a lot of like outdated stuff, and it wasn't like you had to have a good bit of background knowledge to jump into a lot of the videos. And I was like, well, I was like piecing things together and able to at least get some stuff to work on my own. But I was like, well, I'm already starting to try this YouTube stuff out a little bit. Why not just make some videos where like, okay, here's the stuff that I learned, and I wish there was a video that like taught me how to do this. And like started making a couple videos. And like when you start on YouTube, it's just like you get like 10 views, and then the next video gets 12
Well,
views,
tell me
and
about
it's
it. Wait,
like
stop there, stop there, stop
super
there. So that
slow.
was my experience. So I reviewed a different virtual reality game every week for a year. It's a
Oh
YouTube
wow.
channel called Brainman VR. And to this day, remember this was 2019 to 2020. To this day, the vast majority of those videos have single figure views because it
Oh
was
no.
so long. I don't mind because I think this is really important for people to realize, right? No one just rolls the dice the first time and is a massive success. Like there might be one in a million out there, one in a billion who manages to do that. But most people try and fail, but rather than getting all horribly embarrassed, they put it down to experience and go, okay, well, what can I learn from that falling completely on my face? And for me, what I learned was to stick an hour long unedited thing up on YouTube that's me just bumbling around in a VR thing. Oh my God, this is so good. Like, no one wants to watch that because that's slow and boring. People do want to
Yep.
see very heavily edited YouTube VR reviews because they're going to it not to learn a procedure that takes a long time to explain. They're viewing it because they want to quickly find out what good titles are out there that they might want to try themselves. And like I learned that and I honestly have no shame because if I had shame, then I wouldn't tell people what it was so they could see
Exactly.
how bad it was. But that's awesome that you had some experience and then you thought, right, I'm gonna roll the dice again, but with more structure. Is that what?
Right. Yeah, I was just kind of floating around, and I was like, well, I'm gonna try this like web development stuff on YouTube, and then the VR stuff was interesting, so I was like, well, I'll just kind of at the moment just follow what interests me, and then the VR videos started getting a lot more views than like the other videos I had on my channel,
Mm.
and then at a certain point, I just got rid of like unlisted all the rest of the like videos. Like they're still on my YouTube channel. It's just like they're all private now. There's like probably 10 or 15 like videos of just normal web development tutorials. So I got like a little practice in tutorials first,
Yeah.
and then the VR stuff started. Um, and then I've been doing that for like 2 years now.
And what I'm interested to know is how you keep up your energy to bother to do it right. So for example, when a new Unity installation comes out, and they invariably like change things, and then you have to redo a whole one from scratch because you realize you still have that awareness that people who don't necessarily have a background in software engineering might struggle to apply what was relevant to Unity 2019 to Unity 2021. So that's like a lot of work for you. And no one's a one-hit wonder, right? You're going to get things wrong and have to edit and edit and edit, and to get it down and make it like that's a huge amount of work, yet you're still motivated to do it. Why?
The new videos are actually the ones that excite me the most, like where I have to redo a how to get into VR video, because those always take off and do like really well as far as like views and like popularity go. So every just about every year now, because Unity updates constantly, where I have to do like a how to get set up in VR for 2020, how to get set up in VR for 2023 is a video I need to make pretty soon,
So it's
and
like a
I know
marketing
those are gonna get
it's like a
crazy
marketing
views.
opportunity, right? So you're actually
Yeah,
thinking
exactly.
strategically that it's a new year, a new so okay, cool. I thought you were doing your sort of I thought you were just doing it despite it being annoying, but you're actually you're more strategic than I actually had thought of being myself.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's a little difficult for me is trying to get, and I haven't been very consistent recently, which is kind of the reason for the emergence of this podcast, is because I need some other form of content besides me making an entire project that I want to make a tutorial out of, like figuring out what all the pieces are going to be, and then remaking it to make sure I understand it correctly, and then remaking it a third time to film it, and then posting on YouTube. That takes a long time.
Mm.
So like the gorilla tag video that I posted, and like all those kinds of like little here's how to do this kind of interaction or whatever, is all like a project I had to make ahead of time
Button
and
press.
lots of work.
I use
Yeah.
get this. So I wanted to create a multiplayer thing that I could take out to the World Economic Forum in Geneva and say, hey, you and your colleagues are scattered all over the world. You come into the office periodically. You work for the Sustainable Transport Division. It's a little bit like, they're mostly focused on stopping freight, traveling through the air using fossil fuels or traveling across oceans with fossil fuels. They're looking at large scale stuff, but I'm like, it's a little bit kind of inconsistent for you to be driving petrol vehicles to all come and meet in Geneva and back. Just do it in a VR headset. So rather than pointing them towards other people's stuff, I got them to use my stuff, and I built it from scratch. And when it came to like, but what if someone else wants to present these slides? I want to have it. I don't want to have confusion with the networking with regard to like who owns the I don't know, like the tablet that you use to control what brings up the next slide, for example. And so your buttons were a lifesaver because I used your buttons to bring up the next slide. I used your buttons to bring up the domino alley, action alley. I used your buttons to, activate the next shooting level or the next bowling level or all that kind of stuff. So if that's what I did, I must have used that button tutorial. And then I didn't change any of the settings. I used that same button. And what I realized was if you make the button bigger or smaller, you need to change the settings. I couldn't be asked to work it out. So it was exactly the same dimensions. But you're like, just through, someone called it brute force. Like they saw the thing that I created and they're like, wow, you have just created this with brute force. Like just watching YouTube videos and then taking that little thing and then using it in a million and one different ways. So yeah, those little modular YouTube channels are hugely useful for someone like me.
Yeah, and I was and the if you watch a lot of those, I start over every time I make one of those videos where I'm like, all right, we're gonna start from the very beginning. You haven't even started making a little project. And originally, like I did that once or twice, and I was like, well, Unity updated a little, like a few, what they named a few things, so I'll just start from the beginning. And then after doing that a few times, people are like, wow, this is really useful because now like I don't have to go back to the first video of how to set everything up. Is like you just kind of speedily go through like the little setup, and then if you don't want to watch it, I always do like a here, skip to this timestamp, and you can jump to the actual meat and potatoes of the video.
And also, repetition is king. So I think when other people in the
True.
space like provide you with the starting template, they're trying to be kind, or maybe they're trying to get you to subscribe to them on Patreon or whatever in order to get hold of that thing. But actually,
Ah,
I've found that starting from scratch every single time, how else are we going to get it into our thick skulls? Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh
because
yeah.
repetition really, and that's where being a neuroscientist sort of comes in useful. Like, I on the one hand, I might think, oh, I'm impatient. I want to do this quickly. On the other hand, I'm like, no, repetition is king. If I really want to internalize this, so I don't always have to rewatch every single time I want to do something, a tutorial. I need to imprint it on my memory banks, and repetition helps me to do that. So yeah, thanks for bothering to start at the beginning every single time. So the podcast, what do you have in mind in terms of? There's so many ways to do a podcast. The one I did, Geek Sheets Weird Science. Me and my co-host, who was a radio DJ for a rock channel here in London. We would just go through all of the kind of science stories of the week, and they were kind of weird. We'd always go for the weird and wacky ones, and she'd reject anything that wasn't kind of appealing to the masses. As in, I was interested in it because I'm a geek and I'm a scientist. So she was the chic, sophisticated one, and I would reject her stuff if it was like really attention grabbing and fascinating, but there was actually no scientific backing in it. So we covered stories like pandas who fake pregnancy, mice who sing for sex. Making drugs out of yeast. You can reprogram yeast DNA to make any kind of recreational drug you want. So that's one way of doing it. But then you have people like the guy who does voices of VR, Kent Bai, and he sort of interviews experts in the field. Like, what kind of thing, what kind of podcast do you enjoy listening to?
Um, I like the interview podcasts are good because especially if you know the person. So like I found like interview podcasts in particular are like very hit or miss. So like sometimes it's like, oh, that person's interesting, so I'm listening to that podcast, but not gonna listen to any of the other ones. Um, but that one seems like the easiest one to make because then you just like have people come on and you just
Chat to
talk to
them.
them and have a conversation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like what have you done, what are you working on, like all that kind of stuff. But then podcasts like you've done where you just kind of take what's in the news and talk about what's popular are also really good for especially like cutting it up into like little pieces that you can then repost on YouTube,
Mm.
and like providing like here's a little snippet of info that I can just like put out there and you can cover a lot of ground in like an hour or so. um, And honestly, like, this is like one of my this is the first one, so just kind of like maybe I'll do 20 of them and figure out which one I like.
That's you know what? As a scientist, I love that trial and error. You know, try things and then follow the ones that feel right. You know, to think that you can plan all this stuff out in advance and then make the right decisions. I just think it's unrealistic. The thing to do is to try a few different things. And you were open to this. I said, well, don't
Mhm.
interview me. Let me be a co-host. I've done it before. We could guide each other, and then it. Probably people have an appetite for Justin P. Barnett because they know you and they don't know me, right? But then it might be that I provide a sort of counterpoint where, like, I'm asking you questions that reveal a little bit about you. If you were to just offer
Exactly.
it to the audience, it might come across as a little bit hubristic, you know, a little bit arrogant.
True.
I'm genuinely interested to know the answer to these questions because I thought of I often promised in my sort of VR review episodes that I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to start doing tutorials to help you out because I'm in that zone where I haven't yet learnt enough to forget what it's like to be an absolute beginner. I kept promising
Yeah.
that I'll get around to doing it, but to be honest, by the time I got to the end of 52, doing it every week for 52 weeks was quite hard work. And I don't know why I set myself that arbitrary challenge. But by the time I got to the end of it, I was just so sick and tired of having to film, edit, cut together, put things out, write the description, do this. And then before just when I'd done the last one, I had to start planning the next one. It was, I wasn't getting any views.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and then I had a final major project to do. I had 6 months until I finished my master's in virtual reality. So I was
Hmm.
sort of building this bird flight simulator, but instead of laying on top of a really expensive machine that allows you to flap your wings like a bird, I just had people flat on their back, looking up at the ceiling, doing snow angels, and that was how they
Oh,
sort of
nice.
flapped through the VR world. So it was really really quite a lot of work. And then when I got to the end of that, I kind of forgot about the YouTube dream. I conveniently just watched YouTube.
Conveniently, like,
Uh,
oh, there's all the work I don't have to do anymore.
yeah, yeah. If you do something like that, it makes the rest of your life feel like a holiday.
Yeah, true. I'm having a baby here at the end of December. And I'm honestly looking forward to it because I'll have some free time because I won't have to worry about all the business stuff that I've got going on right now.
Congrats, man! I've got one coming at the end of February. Is that your first?
Ooh, yep, this will be my first.
Yeah, me too. So,
Ooh, interesting.
scary,
A little
exciting.
bit. It's
Both more of one
a
than the
little more
other.
exciting. I'm not as worried. I weirdly like when I started to get into YouTube and like, you know, have almost like entrepreneurship type stuff, like I don't know, like it's kind of like a weird mental shift that I've gone through where like I used to be that kind of person who wanted to plan ahead every single week and like do all the like I know exactly what's videos coming out for the next quarter and like all that kind of stuff. But then as I like have kind of gotten into the YouTube world and working for myself a little more and not like in the corporate machine as much or just kind of disconnecting a little bit, quiet quitting, what do they call it nowadays?
Quiet quitting. Congrats.
Yeah,
Sounds like a
where
very
I've
rewarding process.
yeah, well, I've gotten to the point where like I very much can go with the flow a lot better, and I'm like, oh, well, we'll try this and see if it works, and like all that kind of stuff. And so I guess I'm kind of taking that approach to having the baby as well. And then my wife's kind of the complement of me, where she's like all prepared and has done all this research about what we need to do and like what we need to have, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And like I'm just kind of the calm presence in the family at the moment.
Sweet.
So
That sounds like a very fair sharing of responsibility.
yeah,
Very
yeah, I think it'll
equitable.
it'll work out pretty well.
Good. So, what game do you think that your son/daughter needs to play in VR that hasn't been invented yet, but will be invented by 2035?
Hmm. Oh, that's a good question. So I've always had a dream of having not necessarily a game, but a almost like a whole education system in
Okay.
VR. So if you think like almost like the Magic School Bus, if you've ever watched
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
TV show where they, have a bus that can like transform and like, teleport and time travel and all that kind of stuff. And so they can go visit dinosaurs, they can like go into the bloodstream and like look at biology and like all that kind
Wicked.
of stuff. And
Yeah.
so if you can imagine taking that kind of concept and putting it in VR, and so like for instance, you come to school where you put on the headset at a certain time, you can kind of see all the other avatars of all the students that are in your class. Your teacher walks in, just a normal classroom, you can see all the avatars, but then your teacher says, "Okay, today we're gonna go visit the Roman Colosseum or some you the pyramids or something," and snaps their fingers, and then the classroom melts away, and now you're like
Mm.
standing next to the pyramids, and your mission is to go explore like this area and go talk to this person and like go find this thing, and like little HUD markers pop up, and that's like class for the day.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and so that's kind of my vision for like, because like the school systems especially in America are kind of rough right now. So
Is
being able
it?
to like
Okay.
update those with something that's a lot more immersive, the kids will be focused the whole time, because VR is, if nothing else, a very like you can only focus on the VR while you're there.
Yeah. Oh, you're so right.
So
That is one thing. There are a lot of things about VR that are difficult to grasp until you put a VR headset on for the first time. I'm talking about the masses out there, not necessarily the people
yeah,
who watch your show. But the one thing that they do get is everyone's irritated by how hard it is to get someone's complete attention. People are always looking at their screens. They're always like, eyes on their cell phone instead of on looking towards you. We've all been there.
exactly.
And this idea that a VR headset is a blindfold, and so the only
Hmm.
thing that you can look at is what the app you're using is designed to show. The people at the World Economic Forum, they instantly picked up on that because it's a real attention economy. Everyone's fighting for your attention, and at the moment, VR is a place where there aren't ads popping up vying for your attention. There aren't, people
Hmm.
just trying to distract you from focusing on what you're doing. And I love your pick. I love your vision of what education might involve with the help of VR headsets. But I want to play devil's advocate. What I worry about with VR headsets is that even, let's say, the Quest 2, which is pretty lightweight, or the Quest Pro, which I had a go on the other day, which is even lighter. Um, and there are other headsets out there. I had a go at a conference recently on the Pico 3 and the Pico 4, and I've, the Vive Focus 3 and all that kind of stuff. It's still a thing hanging on the front of your face, trying to, gravity's trying to pull your head forward. So with an adult
Hmm.
neck like mine, I played a bit of rugby in my time, but even I find after half an hour, maybe it's because of the damage I did to myself recording all of those, VR game reviews, like my neck is not in good shape, and I worry that if you put 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds in these headsets, and they are so absorbed by what they're doing and they love it and they just desperately don't want to take it off, are we not going to end up with like kids going to high school, like, and they just like, like a like an
That is a
elderly
good
person with
question.
an arched neck? Like, how do we get around that? How do we solve that?
That is a very good question, because like I've kind of been in the same situation, not necessarily with the neck, because I also played football, so I have some of the neck muscles, I guess. But like even just sitting down all day in a work environment coding, like I've started to have like back issues,
Right.
and I'm like 26.
No way.
So like
That's too
now I
soon.
have a standing desk, and I like never sit down. Like I only sit down like for videos if I'm filming them. And like the whole rest of the day I'm standing up. And
Wow.
so I totally get the like, putting our bodies in situations that they weren't like necessarily meant to be
Yeah,
in.
we did not evolve the muscle. So it's funny. This is the similar thing with the bird flight simulator, right? So so
Yeah.
so the way people usually do it, and there was this thing. I went to OR. AWE. You have one in the USA. That's the
Hmm.
big one.
Yep.
We have one in Europe, and it was in Lisbon. I went last month. The thing that won the whole show, like best in show, it really really irritated me because it was one of those ones which was, it was visually spectacular. It was called Vitruvian. It was one of those, like Vitruvian Man is like
Oh
that,
yeah, yeah.
like Westworld. Holding
Right,
onto the thing,
yeah.
and it was in one of those sort of space trainer things where it can rotate. The rings can rotate within,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Rings within rings within rings. And they had like old school joysticks, like you're playing a game on the ZX Spectrum, like I did in my childhood, because I'm considerably older than you. But it would like you move forward, so that you'd get them so that they were like angled head down, right? And they were strapped in from behind. But it's ridiculous because we're not birds. Our necks
Yeah.
are not designed to hold our head from dropping just using these pussy little back neck muscles.
Right.
And they had people in it, right? This thing, what, despite everyone who tried it saying it was really uncomfortable and really jerky, it just drove me mad that they awarded it, because it always had cues, it looked spectacular, it created the biggest buzz, but it was a really bad VR experience because we're not
Hmm.
designed, our ancestors evolved, to be bipedal, upright standing, creatures. And if you don't bear the fundamental limitations of our skeleton in mind, you're going to hurt people, you know. And
Right.
and so I've like the reason I feel so strongly about it is because my goddaughter has a little brother, and so she's all right. She's 11, 12. I can put her in a headset, and she's not quite 13, the official age, but 20, 30 minutes at a time, her neck's fine. She can handle it. But
Mm-hmm.
her brother's like, well, he's 10 now, but when they first came around to try out, this clunking great thing, I only put him
Oh.
in it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time, because I didn't want to be the one responsible for snapping his little neck. Not snapping, but like giving him long term, like neck problems. And
Right.
I think it's like we don't think enough about this. Like people invariably buy a headset, get bored of it, their kids find it, love it, and they're in it all the time. Like there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
Take Rec Room. How many under 10s just live in Rec
Oh
Room?
yeah.
I worry about them. I worry about their poor little necks.
Yeah, and especially when like the Quest 2 came out and like they don't even have like a counterweight on the backside. Like it's just like all front weight.
T-
And
t-
so like I understand when it's weighted evenly and
yeah,
like you get a little bit on the back, like the Pro is a little bit um more evenly weighted.
yeah,
So you get a little like yeah, like it balances almost right there in the middle.
yeah.
Um
I've got this bad boy. Whoop. So I bought the extra bit, but like I work.
oh there you go.
I'm not going to say who for, but I work for a really top VR company who work in the medical space, and none of them use this. Now I know it's mostly because they like hold it for long enough to see whether the tweak they've made works or whatever. But I'm like, dude, it's not about the battery power; it's about the counterbalancing. Do it for your neck's sake. But
Mm.
whatever. Like I'm, I didn't start long ago, so it's too soon for me to start lecturing them on what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, you're still the newbie.
Yeah. But listen, this is
Yeah.
Justin. The reason I'm so excited about virtual reality is because I believe, and I want to know if you agree with me, that whilst VR was first sort of attempted in the 60s and 70s and had a comeback in the 80s and 90s, there's been so many false dawns, but we're finally kind of getting somewhere with it, right? I believe that VR can be a tremendous force for good, but I believe that augmented reality is a force for evil. What do you think about that? like,
Interesting.
can you imagine why I might be thinking along those lines?
Yeah, so and and to kind of piggyback on that, I also think that AR is going to supersede VR and become the future, as opposed to like everyone's investing all this VR tech and the VR is cool, but I think VR is gonna be how like gaming consoles are right now, and then AR is gonna be how your iPhone is. Um, and so the that kind of tech I think is the like I don't know, it's I think VR is more fun, and so that's why I'm developing VRs because you can like totally transport yourself to a whole new world. AR is gonna be like glasses that you wear constantly, and so like at dinner I can project the football game on top of my little sister as like we're having dinner, and I don't even have to talk to her, and like there's like so many different distractions and stuff that'll be able to like intercede, kind of how we were talking before about like VR directs you towards one thing. AR is gonna kind of do the opposite.
It's going to split attention. That's the sort of
Mm-hmm.
that's the nub of it. But if you go beyond, I think it's going to be an absolute privacy nightmare. And maybe I've been listening to too much Kent By, but if you've got cameras that are you know, trawling the net for just processing all the images that are available, you're going to be in a situation where people are walking along with their augmented reality glasses or their augmented reality contact lenses,
Hmm.
and this information is going to be consulting the internet. So, at a glance, someone's going to be able to look at you, scrape information off of the internet about you, and put your name, your address, your bank details, your age, your date of
Oh, that's
birth.
gonna
Like,
be
like you,
wild.
you could easily overlay information about everyone. So to begin with, it would be benign. It would be at a conference. How useful! You don't have to look down at people's
Yep.
badges the whole time. You can instantly just have arrows pointing over the top of the. You've combed through the list of people you want to talk to, and then it will just augmentedly point them out. But then once you've done
Right.
that, you can attach all sorts of information to that arrow, like who's got the most money to invest, or who's whose house is near to your band of criminal friends who are going to go around and knowing that he's at the conference and not at his house, burgle his home. Like there's, I just think the merging of augmented reality and AI, I cannot see any way it's not going to make society awful.
Yeah, well, there is that graph where it is people will sacrifice security for ease of use.
Yes.
So if you think of things like your Amazon Alexa or Siri,
Yeah.
ease of use to talk to, some always listening device where it'll like, do whatever you want and you don't have to like pull your phone out and type any things in. It's super easy, but then your security goes down a significant notch because now there's a listening device just hanging out in your house. And like, there's probably lots of limitations on it, but then like that's stuff you never really know.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Really, really interesting. Do you use those voice activated helpers just out of interest?
I used to, but then I like, so I had it like, as a tech person, I'm like, oh, new tech, fun, like, cool, I gotta try it out. And then I just like, you didn't use it like a ton, and then I'm like, well, if I'm not using it, it's not really worth it to kind of just have it plugged in over there all the time. And so, I don't anymore. But yeah, that like that kind of stuff is interesting. For like, even like security cameras, like what Google's Blink and Ring and all that kind of stuff is all
Mm,
just like cameras that are connected to the internet and like everything's hackable.
yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, but that's a funny thing, isn't it? Everything's hackable. You can imagine people saying that. It's like, well, what's the point in not using the convenience of Siri or Alexa or whatever the other ones that are out there? Um, because everything's hackable. I mean, I can try and protect my privacy, but they'll always find a way around it. I don't like that people sort of they surrender control to the point where they just let other forces they feel like they can't control ride roughshod over them. Like I feel like you've got to put up some resistance whilst we still can.
exactly. Yeah, and that's when we get into AR and like people are walking around with cameras, like the new Quest Pro has eye tracking and face tracking,
Oh,
and
does it?
so, mm-hmm,
And so eye tracking so that it can do foveated rendering. Is that
yep, yeah. So
the
it's foveated rendering, and then also now you can make eye contact in like VR
and
applications,
that
which is
is
actually really
pretty
cool.
strong. Yeah, that was the one thing that was
Yeah.
missing,
And
wasn't
then
it?
like the facial reactions were like, instead it was just kind of randomly generated and based on what you were saying, and now it actually mirrors your facial features and like, the way your mouth moves and all
Well,
that kind
that's
of
good
stuff.
because I have to say that I know for sure the way they did it before, because I learnt the hard way, is to analyze the words that you're saying, work out the emotional overtones in terms of like if you say I'm really happy or I'm so pleased that this happened, then it'll put a smiling expression on your face, and then if you say oh I'm a bit upset about blah blah blah, it'll put a sad expression on your face. So it was definitely analyzing the content of the sort of voice to text transcription and then working out from the words what you were saying, because I was telling a story when I was in a Meta app and I was chatting with a friend, and I was telling a story about how 3 months ago something really really sad happened, and I fell out horribly with a friend, and I was really but I'd already said like 5 minutes before that it's all good now. Like we're through it and out the other end, and I patched up with my friend. But then when I was telling what my emotional state was back then, my mate Ed was like, "Dude, are you sure you're all right? Because you're talking, the words you're saying suggest that you're over it, but you look so sad. Do you know what I
Huh.
mean? So in trying to guess what my emotions were by doing this sort of voice to text and then emotional analysis thing, it was completely misrepresenting my emotional state in this
Mm-hmm.
social VR experience. And I was kind of horrified because had he not clarified that, he might have gone away and said to my friend, "I think we need to do an intervention with Rich. He's
Oh
saying he's all
yeah.
right, but he's really upset." And so, I think it's a good thing that they're actually at least accurately reproducing the real facial expressions and eye position rather than these estimates, which I think could end up in tears.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You've got like weird. You're making eye contact with people weirdly, and yeah. So that's like one of those things where it's good because now you can make eye contact. You have accurate facial expressions, but now they always know where you're looking.
Yeah, right. Do
So
you do VR social apps of any description yourself? Like, do you ever do VR chat or Rec Room or Alt Space? Have you
mainly
found?
alt space.
Yeah,
So I am part of a VR developer community who we meet up like twice a week in alt space.
oh, do you?
Um, and so that's pretty fun. And I'm actually working. I have a company that I co-own, where we're making like a VR template basically. That's basically like Altspace or VR Chat or one of those, but you have all the. It's just a GitHub repo you can download, and then you have all the functionality as well. So you can like play cornhole and like add in a whiteboard and like all the like stuff you would want. And so we're kind of trying to make like a better template to like start multiplayer VR games with. That is currently in the works.
Great. What's it called? What's that project called?
It's called Foundry.
Foundry. Nice.
Yeah. So like you're in the forge, you can make whatever you want. So there's lots
I
of
get
symbolism
it.
to it.
So
Um,
the World of Warcraft people will be imagining forging
yeah,
weapons, like
exactly.
forging digital weapons. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
What's the best VR game you've played in recent times?
Oh goodness. So single player games are fun. And so like Half-Life Alyx is amazing.
I keep getting stuck
The
in the ceiling.
I have gotten stuck in one level where I can I need to like back up a little bit because I have gotten stuck in one like level where I'm like I don't know where to go at this point. I think I'm stuck as well.
Okay, okay, good. Well, at least it happens to experts like you, not just muggles like me. Go on, sorry,
uh,
Half Life Alex, but we have to say Half Life Alex is good, right? Because
right.
it's
Yeah,
so much
that's
better than all the
kind
others.
of
It's like duty. If you don't say that, then no one believes anything else that comes out of your mouth.
yeah, exactly. The one I weirdly consistently keep going back to is Population One.
Really?
So
I've never even
the
tried it. I
multiplayer
can't believe
battle
it.
royale. But it's just because
Oh,
like
population
I
one.
don't
So,
know.
so, so it's kind of like Fortnite.
Yeah, basically Fortnite in VR. Less building, but yeah, more. It's basically Fortnite in VR.
Because
But
I really
I don't
enjoyed
know.
that. Sorry to interrupt, but I really enjoyed that in Rec Room. There was Rec Royale or something, which was
Yeah, they've got like a little paintball one.
oh, I
Yeah, that one's
love that
fun.
so much. Before the
That
kids
is a
came,
fun one.
Justin, before the kids came, Rec Room, I don't know if you were in there, but Rec Room in like 2018, 2017, 2018 was amazing. It was
Hmm.
just adults from all over the world, and you could have like a proper, just normal conversation, and there wasn't screeching and screaming and all that kind of stuff. And I went on so many brilliant adventures. And like, I loved Laser Quest, but the population one, I think it was called Rec Royale. It was so good. It was so much fun to hang out with adults. And then all the kids came in and descended on it, and like I can't go there
Yep.
anymore. And
Yeah. Now it's just wild.
but no one's replicated an adult version of Rec Room to get some of that magic back. Like I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that proliferated to the point where they became a victim of their own success. But anyway, I'm sorry I keep interrupting you. It's just I've got an
Oh, you're
agile mind.
fine.
Population one, Half Life Alyx, Population one, you go back to again and again, presumably because you're always fighting new people and you never have the same experience twice.
Right. And that's kind of the beauty of multiplayer that as a developer, I'm like, oh, I like the single player games and the story aspect. You can do a lot of really cool stuff, but like honestly, just a simple multiplayer game that like varies every time because you're fighting new people is like usually one that I will keep going back to as in playing. Which as a developer, I'm like, oh, come on, like play some more interesting games. But then I'm like, oh, but this one's just consistently fun. So
Have you ever played Final Approach?
no, I have
So
not.
Final Approach is a lovely one. It's like you've got a godlike perspective, you've got teeny tiny little aeroplanes or helicopters or whatever, and you reach out, grab them in midair, pull the trigger, and then you trace a path and they follow the path. So you're sort of setting the trajectory of the plane. And so
Oh.
there's various different ways you can do it. It starts off where you're like on an island and there's, this plane's got a problem or it needs to refuel, and you just get it to land and then take off again. And it's sort of coordinating all these little planes. But then in the later levels, your UFOs come along and you're controlling miniature, uh, you know, MiGs or fighter planes, and then you're directing them to shoot the UFOs to smithereens. The reason I bring it up is because there's a guy, an English guy, who has a company called, or a sort of VR art collective called Marshmallow Laser Feast. And I was on a panel that he was on for Vans a few years ago. And I said to him, right, you make all this incredibly amazing stuff where, for example, his installations involve going into the forest somewhere, and then there's headsets that are disguised as tree trunks, and you put the tree trunk on your head, and then he's sort of created this incredible VR experience. So he's one of those kind of wacky artists who really thinks outside the box. And he said, "No, I don't play because I build VR. I don't play any games." Like, actually, no, there was that one game. There was that one game, Final Approach, which I found strangely Moorish. So I'll try Population One. You try that, and then we'll see what
Okay.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a thing. Like I don't play a ton of new like VR games as they come out. Like I probably should play a lot more games than I do, but
That's
as
not
like a
your that's
VR
not your niche
developer.
though. It's not your niche. You should play as much as you feel like. I think if you're busy making cool stuff and you don't need extra inspiration, so be it. You don't need it. There's hundreds of games out there for you to play if you're in need of more inspiration. And if you tell me what kind of category you'd like, I'd be happy to recommend you some, because I've played a lot of them, even half of the ones on SideQuest, because I like seeing
Ah.
scrappy developers who are like, I want people to play my game. And actually, I've met some people who I thought were scrappy developers, and then discovered that, unlike me, sort of building stuff single handedly and constantly chastising myself for being so slow, I realized that these people I think are in my shoes. It's like a team of 5 people. I'm like, oh my god, they've got an art department. They've got software engineers, and so
Yeah.
what I didn't realize was even proper companies go through quite a slow process of developing and further developing and further developing, and I didn't realize that that takes place across many years before they're even ready to launch on like a proper store. I figured it would, that iteration process would take place over months. How wrong I was.
Yeah, it is it's a bit complicated. And it's always like you're making good progress and you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna be done like in 6 months, but then that last the 80/20 rule, that last 20% takes like a whole year to like polish and make it nice, and have the frame rates be consistently above 72 frames and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Is 72 what we're aiming for? I didn't even know that. I have one question for you. Because I know that we're running out of time, and this one, it's a bit of a curveball.
All right.
But how did you discover Jordan B. Peterson?
Ah, that is a curveball question. I think I read his 12 rules for life book,
Mm.
and then from there just kind of went down a rabbit hole, and thought his advice was like super interesting, and I was like, oh yeah, like this all like makes sense, like the rules of like in the way he explains them. So
Because I really like. I have to say, I don't know whether you did it on purpose or not. Because I could imagine having it as your desktop was just so that when you privately pull up your computer, you can remind yourself of some of the guidance that he's given over the years. But I also wondered if maybe it was kind of accidentally on purpose. You're introducing viewers of your YouTube channel to this wisdom, but without actually ever mentioning it.
I don't know. I think honestly the first couple of videos I was like, whatever, and then I was like, I just won't change it. I'll just keep it there. And then I have gotten like some nasty comments because he's a very polarizing person. About like how can you have like his you know thing
Manifesto kind
on
of
your
thing. Yeah,
background or whatever, and I'm like, I mean, you don't have to acknowledge all of his like views to think some of his rules are interesting and
yeah,
like useful. So
yeah. No, I think it's great. You stick to your guns, man. I mean, I'm sure you don't need to be told. There's always haters out there. Ignore the trolls,
oh
man.
yeah.
There's a lot of people. with a lot of bile inside them. To suffer as a human is inevitable. Like, you can't go through life and avoid suffering. And this is one thing that Jordan B. Peterson, of course, talks about. Not to mention other famous people through the years. But like some of these people, they just have no useful place to direct their bile, and so for some of them, they don't have good friends to talk things through them, or family members that they can open up to, and it just people like you who put yourself in the firing line, you're going to soak up some of it, but you're doing them a favor. Every time they
Yeah.
eject some bile, they get a bit of catharsis, they feel a bit better. So just ignore them. Keep doing what you do. You're doing it right, Justin P.
Yeah, also the influence of the middle initial came from him a little bit.
I did it.
The
And what does it
Jordan
stand
B.
for?
Peterson. I was like, oh, Justin B. Well, Justin Barnett apparently is a very popular name, so I just started using the P
What
because
does
I was
P
like,
stand
oh,
for?
Jordan B. Peterson,
What does it
Justin
stand for?
P.
What does it stand
Barnett,
for? What does it stand for?
Patrick,
Patrick.
Justin Patrick.
Paddy. Can I call you Paddy? Can I call you Paddy from now
Patty, that's actually a nickname I've never had yet before.
on? Mate, we've only just met. It's way too soon to be asking for that.
Not on a nickname basis yet.
Brilliant. Well, Justin, thanks for the opportunity to see what happens with us as co-hosts. This is sort of like an audition, a test, a feel. You might put it out, you might not. Who knows?
I think it went great.
I think this would be lovely. Like, if you put it out and if it gets traction, great. You might get people go, look, Justin, we love you, but get rid of that English bloke. He's really annoying. So be it, right? I really, really don't mind. But what I would love is, assuming it doesn't flop instantly, if the two of us were to interview a third party, and
Hmm.
then like develop this sort of not good cop, bad cop thing, but like I, it's your show, you lead it, and then every now and again I'd come in with some sort of neurosciencey angles. Like
I
I've
like it.
I've played that role in the past, and whilst, as you can probably tell, my natural instinct is to lead and be voluble and interrupty, and just stuff pops into my head and it just comes out of my mouth. I have played the role where I jot things down to get it out of my head, and then I sort of interject at a more kind of tactically appropriate moment. So
Hmm.
I feel like because that's what I did with Leanna Bird. My role evolved as the months and years went by. So yeah, if you want to give it a roll, man, I can make myself available once a week. More than that, and
Yeah.
my fiance will.
You can do we have to schedule it ahead of time once a week.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, I've honestly been thinking about um kind of doing a little bit of a pivot with the YouTube channel, and right now it's just Justin P. Barnett, but maybe doing a shift and renaming it to like VR creators or something like that, and bringing on a couple different people, so I'm not the sole face of like the whole YouTube channel. Whether that be someone like you to help me interview people with podcasts. I mean, you could even have like your own little segment if you wanted to,
Yeah,
if
no.
this ends up going well
So
and like that
a
kind of
lot,
stuff.
a lot of my favorite shows have been segments. I don't know if
Uh
you
huh.
have you heard of Ali G. Borat, Ali G. That
No.
character. He's a comedian who sort of pretends that he's stupid and like street guy, but he's actually a fiercely intelligent person. He's interviewed famous people all over the world, playing this role of being a dummy, like being a sort of street hoodlum, and he used to be he originated on this show called the 11 o'clock show, where there were 5 or 6 different comedians, and then he just had a little 3-minute sizzle in the half-hour show, and everyone loved that show because like his bit was so good. The others were all good, but he was like excellent, and I like those ones where it's like a mosaic of different
Mm-hmm.
contributors. So if you dude, I'm just chuffed that you even picked up the phone.
Yeah, because that's just something like with the YouTube channel, like you know, my end goal is to, basically convince people to like start making VR, like get into VR development. And so like it doesn't necessarily have to be me and my face on everything. And so bringing in like a couple people who are really good developers who want to like make projects and then
Yeah.
like can do tutorials on how to make um, you know, like the backpack system from Into the Radius, or like, oh, that's a good game I should mention.
Oh, Into the
Um,
Radius. Okay.
yeah, that's a really like as realistic as like it possibly can be. It's like a post-apocalyptic kind of survival type game.
Okay.
But it's like to the point where you have to clean your guns and like reload your magazines type
Right.
of like realistic. Um, where like if you shoot a gun and drop the magazine and don't pick it back up, you lose that magazine. And like when you go back, you only have like, you know, one mag now and a box of bullets, and you have to reload that one mag every time you shoot it. Kind of like realism.
Okay.
It's interesting.
Cool.
Um, but like how to make this particular system of this like game, like so bringing on a couple of like, you know, other developer people who are really good at that, and like some like someone like you to help facilitate a podcast, because I'm also I'm like, you know, the developer who's like a bit introverted, and you're really good at asking questions and coming at different things from different angles, which I like.
Okay, good,
um
good. No, dude, like I say, I'm happy. I'm happy to help. Like, and the joy of it is, I'm not looking to get anything particularly out of it apart from kind of like you, inspire. Like, I've got so much from that godlike feeling of just thinking, hey, maybe I could create a thing, and then like blah, 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 like by the end of the weekend, you've built that thing. Like the other day, I was like, all
mhm.
this shooting with gun stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if you were like blow darts?
Ooh.
So the velocity of, oh, maybe this is something you would want to do. So I got it to the point where you pull the thing up to your hand, but then I press the trigger. What I want to do
Uh-huh.
is, and in other things, I've got like you're playing music and then you analyze the volume and then you make the speaker, the speaker
Ah.
move in time to the volume so that you can tell that that sound's coming out of that object. Like there's something moving in time with it. So I've kind of got the two halves of it. I've got the sound analysis, I can tell the volume, and I've got the thing that's shaped like a pea shooter. That, but what I wanted to do was get it so that you have to make the sound in order to get the thing to fly out. And if you do
Yeah.
it quietly, it just boop, drops out slowly. And if you do it really with power, then it shoots hard. But anyway, whatever. I'm just putting it out there. But
That's
like,
clever.
I came up with that idea, and then by the end of the weekend, it at least looked, at least for the sake of doing a video where you're sort of videoing yourself live and you can see what I'm seeing in the thing. And I cheated it because I just go and press the button.
Yeah. There you go.
But
Like any good demo.
yeah. I have good ideas for things, but I think you could end up in a place where developers with good ideas would want to showcase them on your channel if you did that.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
even if it wasn't, it might end up being a place where people with money to burn on VR look, just. Oh, I thought my fiance was shouting at me to shut up because I do have a loud voice. But we've got a builder who's it's 8 o'clock at night, and this builder's been here since seven in the morning. She's a family
Oh
friend
wow.
of my fiance, but he's still going after 13 hours. He's like,
Hmm.
whoop.
Oh goodness.
Um, yeah. So there's loads of ways it could go, but I always think it's like suck it and see. Like if put a few out there, invite a few people, see how it goes. Some of them will end up in the bin. Some of them you'll think, oh, maybe I'll put it out. They'll just
Right. Yeah, and I would love to, and I've kind of already started talking to a bunch of people about like I just put a tweet out there of like, you know, who would be interested in, you know, doing a podcast. Just because
that's why I'm
I want to
here.
interview yeah, exactly. The like just people who are either very early in their journey and like just getting started, and honestly it could even turn into um like a almost like a help session of like a counseling type session
Ah,
of like,
what a
okay,
good
here's like the next
idea.
steps you need to do in order to like make it, all the way up to someone who like, you know, part of this VR developer community, Spatial Ape, like the person who made Cubism like comes to it every so often, and so like
Yeah.
interviewing really highbrow like developers who have made like really successful games could also land so kind of in that range of like people are new who like we could kind of give advice to, and then people we could get advice from.
I just had a great idea. Do you ever listen to the podcast How I Built This?
Oh, it sounds vaguely familiar.
Dude, listen to it. It's by someone called something Raz or whatever. But it's like that ring. You mentioned the ring bell, the ring
Mm-hmm.
doorbell. So he speaks to the people who start all these different companies, like Burt's Bees, Ring, um, Shopify, Hinge, dating app. Like just all famous tech stuff. and he gets the original Zappos. He gets the original people, and he gets to tell the story of how they built their business and the ups and downs and everything that happened in between.
Yeah.
Listen to a few of them, because I found it when I was sort of starting up my own VR company, and I was kind of scared. I'm not a businessman. I don't know what I'm doing. I would listen to it on the bus on the way to the co-working space I was working out of, and it would fit. It was A, fascinating, B, really inspiring, and C, incredibly consoling to know that every single one of these people who we think of as being huge successes, they had problem after problem. They had crushing defeats before they finally got to their successes. And it's really so, but also it's really well known. And I've definitely, so I've written a few books, and I've been I've been interviewed by one podcast, and then I try and find it, and then like stuff you need to know, and then there's another podcast called Things You Need to Know, and so I'm looking for my podcast on the one, because they kind of copy the name so that people forget the exact word string and they
Oh
type the wrong
yeah.
thing. So you could make a VR podcast called How I Made This instead of How I Built This. You'd catch
Oh.
you'd catch all of the you'd catch all of the people who mistype, that they're looking for how I built this, but they
Yeah,
just
they're
put
like,
the
it's
wrong
how
verb
I
in,
made, how I
and it could be
created.
a little in joke, for those regular listeners who know that sort of this is the Justin P. Barnett, VR developers podcast, and it appeals to a very different market, right? Like not that you'd ever get
Yeah,
sued, but in a court of law, you'd be like, that is interviewing
it's a totally different. Yeah.
CEOs about how they built multi-billion-dollar companies. This one's for geeky VR developers, inspiring them on how to make
Yeah.
crappy little VR things that them and like 12 of their mates will play. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it would make me giggle anyway. But perhaps it's
That's clever. That would be really funny.
hello, my love. Oh, it's Brockhead. Sorry, I broke the vacuum cleaner. I'm getting sure. Look, I've got to go and explain
Oh no.
myself. Justin, I've got to go and clean up all the sawdust downstairs
Okay.
with a duster buster, because I broke the proper
Oh, fun.
Hoover, and I didn't mention it because I was going to replace the hose before anyone found out, not knowing the builder was coming today. So I'm so in the doghouse. Justin, I'm going to love you and leave you. Let's talk
This was
more
great.
online.
Absolutely.
All right. Lovely to meet you, my man.
You too.
All the best.